Okay, so an expansionary policy is what we're going to use in a recession. So if the economy is in a recession, the following three things are going to be true. One, employment is going to be relatively low. So employment is going to be down. And the flip side of that then is unemployment is up. So the unemployment rate is going to be going up as fewer people are working. That's also then going to imply that our output, or real GDP, is going to be going down. So what we'll see is real GDP decreasing and the unemployment rate going up, employment going down. And to combat that, we are going to use an expansionary policy. It makes sense. The economy is contracting, and we're going to try to expand it with policy. So the goal of expansionary policy is to undo all of these three things. So the goal is to increase real GDP, increase employment, and therefore decrease unemployment. That is the goal of expansionary policy. And it could be either fiscal or monetary. And so what's going to happen, and we'll get the details of this as we take each one of these separately, but basically fiscal policy is going to be an increase in government spending and or a decrease in taxes. So that could be tax rates go down or tax rebates, which is, in some way is a decrease in your overall tax rate, but I'm not changing the specific tax rates. I'm just giving you money back. And so I could either increase spending or I could decrease taxes with rebates or changing the tax rates. That's an expansionary policy. And for expansionary monetary policy, it's very simple. We're going to decrease our target federal funds rate. In other words, we're going to decrease interest rates. That is how expansionary monetary policy works. So let's just kind of think about how is this trying to work, or what exactly is going on using our labor market diagram. And so in our labor market diagram, we've got the quantity of labor here on the horizontal axis, our employment, the wage on the vertical axis. We have labor supply, and we have labor demand. So I'm going to start us off here at L1 and W1. And so first I'm going to introduce a recession. So a recession, as we learned in our previous work, is caused by a decrease in labor demand. And we went through all the different reasons and explanations for what might cause that. But what we know is that labor demand is going to decrease. If the wage is downwardly rigid, which we're generally going to assume that the wage can't decrease even though it wants to, that's going to induce a very big decrease in employment. And so that's where we see the recession, right? So that would be well representing our current situation. Labor demand is shifted well to the left. The wage rate can't decrease because of these rigidities. And so that's going to cause a big decrease in employment and an increase then in unemployment, right? There's a lot of people that want to work at that wage that aren't able to. Okay, and so the goal of policy then is to partially undo that. So the whole point of the expansionary policy is to shift the labor demand curve back to the right. So that's the part that we'll have to think about and work on. But in that sense, we've achieved that objective, which is to increase employment and increase real GDP. That would be an expansionary policy. And the goal is simply to increase labor demand. If I do that, then I'm going to get the increase in employment and the increase in real GDP. So that there is expansionary policy. So I didn't put a separate piece for contractionary policy, but just to kind of mention that. Contractionary policy, the goal is the opposite. So in this case, I want to decrease labor demand. So I want to decrease real GDP, decrease employment, and effectively increase unemployment, as strange as that sounds, right? That's the trade-off there of decreasing employment. And so contractionary policy, generally speaking, as we'll see, especially with respect to the Federal Reserve, what we're trying to combat is inflation. So I could be worried about inflation getting higher, and so I am going to impose a contractionary policy. So for monetary policy, contractionary is to increase the interest rate. Contractionary fiscal policy, which we typically don't see often, but we'll cover it nonetheless. Contractionary fiscal policy, I am going to decrease government spending or increase my taxes, either increase tax rates or charge people more, take back negative tax rebates in that sense. So those are pretty rare. So the goal of this is to then decrease labor demand, shift it to the left, and decrease employment and real GDP. Now that might sound strange to do that now, but we'll have some examples where that might make some sense. Okay, so that is the end of Learning Objective 1. And we will start expanding on these ideas by studying each one separately, fiscal and monetary policy.